Lobbies and gentlegrams, today we are reporting live from the depths of hell with angel wings that have yet to flail and fans argue about record sales like the record execs themselves. It's like we're all under a spell, and I hope this message reaches you well, because this is how JID opens up his most recent album, God Does Like Ugly. This is the first album JID has released in over 3 years. Unless it was for creative purposes, JID is far too pristine of a rapper to be taking 3-year hiatuses at this vital of a time in his career. And judging by how he starts off this album, he is frustrated with fan fiction following frivolous facts like how much your album sells or how many hits do you have. That doesn't sound like a man who has been carefully concocting this project for the last 3 years. It sounds more like an individual who is fed up and frustrated with industry politics, profit-obsessed corporations, fans targeting him with unrealistic expectations. When the pressure's so high, it's hard to deliver when everyone wants something different. And it begs the question, what does JID want out of his career? With a hip-hop landscape that has been starving for new superstars and artists to lead the next generation, JID's ability to both draw in viral social media hits and be incredible at not just piecing words together, but piecing thoughts together for entire projects, it's no doubt that he has been the runner-up to lead the big three or the big whatever of his generation. He's got a project done with one of the biggest artists of the last generation, J. Cole, and an album fully produced by the biggest beatmaker of this generation, Metro Boomin. But neither of them have dropped, and it's been 3 years since we saw the last JID album, while the entire time fans are screaming that he's next up to lead this generation. So what's he waiting on? What stars have needed to align? What exactly happened? Well, I think the trajectory of JID's career is a direct reflection of his relationship with Dreamville and the strategies they've taken to not just develop JID as an artist, but really all their artists. Of course, Dreamville is a label founded by J. Cole. And this is not to say in any way that JID and J. Cole hate each other. In fact, JID was just on the Joe Budden podcast talking about how him and J. Cole have an entire unreleased album together. I don't know from what era, and I don't know why it hasn't been released, but it exists.
Me and Cole got a body of a 15-track smoker. Me and him, back and forth. I ain't never told nobody this. Sorry, Cole. The fall-off's gonna be really good. Y'all gonna see.
In fact, J. Cole might have failed JID in certain aspects of his career, but one huge thing that he did was when he sold Dreamville, he gave all the ownership back to the artists on the label.
Dreamville sold Dreamville, and Cole looked out for everybody that was a part of Dreamville.
I heard Boss talk about that.
That's one of the most beautiful things in hip-hop right there. That never happens.
And Cole has always been well-intentioned, right? We know that. The first rapper to delete a diss record. We're going to talk about that later in this video. He's a polite guy, but I think history repeats itself, and this is a prime case of that. Because the same way that I believe J. Cole and Dreamville have failed JID is the same way that Jay-Z almost failed J. Cole. And again, this is not to say that any of them have beef with one another, but it's to say that throughout the history of both JID and J. Cole's careers, there was obvious patterns of neglect by the rapper-owned record labels that signed both J. Cole and JID. Just like JID taking the bold risk of signing to another major rapper's record label, J. Cole, of course, did the same thing. J. Cole was the first rapper signed to Jay-Z's Roc Nation in 2009. He had tried to get his mixtape into Jay-Z's hands for many years, and I believe it was after Jay-Z discovered Cole's mixtape The Warm Up and the song Lights Please that Jay-Z wanted to sign him. They met in New York. That's where Cole pitched Jay-Z his music, and the rest is history. Cole spoke on it saying, I played him the song Lights Please, and he was like, that's the one. I didn't sign instantly, but we kept talking, and he saw my hunger. Signing to Roc Nation felt like a chance to prove myself on the biggest stage. And Cole definitely did have a lot to prove. These are huge shoes to fill. Think about it in multiple facets, right? Number one, he's the first rapper signed to the biggest rapper's record label, Roc Nation. Think about the other rappers that Jay-Z has ushered in the game. Kanye West, Beanie Siegel, etc. Will J. Cole go on to produce even a fraction of the careers that other Jay-Z artists have? And bigger than that, will he always be stuck behind Jay-Z's shadow like certain Rockefeller artists were? But before Cole was even able to ask himself these questions and put this type of pressure on him, he first had to start at step one. Release a debut album to prove to the record label that you're profitable enough to continue investing in. And Cole struggled at the beginning, and it was a direct struggle related to the pressure that Jay-Z and the label had put on him. So just to pause here, when I say that J. Cole failed JID the way Jay-Z failed J. Cole, it obviously wasn't Cole's intention to fail JID. And obviously JID still has an amazing career. But it seems like both J. Cole as a record executive and JID as the artist he is have missed the ball on some major opportunities. And this is all the direct pitfall of being an artist signed to another artist. So like I said, when J. Cole initially signed to Jay-Z, he struggled to catch enough of a buzz to be able to put out his debut album, Cole World. He wanted his first album to be an absolute undisputed classic, a College Dropout, an Illmatic, a Reasonable Doubt. Now the problem was, if you guys don't remember, J. Cole had 3 mixtapes that he put out before getting signed to Rockefeller. The Warm Up, The Come Up, Friday Night Lights. These mixtapes were a direct reflection of Cole's entire life, right? Every story he had up to that point, being around 22 or so, was all documented in the music. He had a lifetime to cook up those 3 tapes and put some of his best projects on those tapes. Now, he's got what? A 6-month window to produce his first album on a brand new record label started by the biggest and best rapper in the world. And this is back in the day when you couldn't just get an internet buzz, right? Or at least that wasn't enough to carry you. Like, J. Cole got the internet buzz by putting his best tracks on those 3 mixtapes, but now you needed something to stick on radio. That's how you caught the attention of mainstream America in 2010. Remember the last major hip-hop act that Jay-Z broke out before J. Cole? It was Kanye. Kanye's massive success wasn't a direct product of internet blogs or online mixtapes. It was hard work at the record label to push singles to get them on radio and then have a continuous flow of single after single for each project. This is how artists broke into the mainstream in 2010. Nowadays, you could just post your song on SoundCloud, it goes viral on TikTok or whatever, and you're good to go. But being signed to another artist who came up in a different era, Jay-Z didn't necessarily understand the power of the internet maybe the same way Cole did. There's a reason why Cole put his best songs on his online mixtapes, because he knew the power of your music spreading online and cultivating a real fan base on the internet. But it didn't matter what Cole wanted. It didn't matter the artistic direction he wanted to go. He needed a hit. If he wanted to put his album out, he needed something on the radio to be circulating so that Jay-Z and the Roc Nation team felt comfortable actually distributing his album out in stores and making that investment. So Cole worked effortlessly for about 6 months, watching a bunch of his peers like Big Sean, Wiz Khalifa, Drake, Wale, all catch their own set of hits that would reach radio. Meanwhile, Cole is out here struggling. He's got the skill to produce amazing records, but not necessarily the knack for hearing a hit. And Jay-Z, again, taking on that executive role, but being an artist himself from a different era, is a little bit detached at this point. So he starts throwing J. Cole into the studio with pop producers who specifically design these mainstream rap songs that you guys probably remember if you were around in the 2010s that just sound so cheesy and tacky, like they're just meant to be abused on radio or in commercials. Think about like No Sleep by Wiz Khalifa or Fly Like a G6. And then think about J. Cole in the studio with those guys. It doesn't really work, right? And this is the vision that Jay-Z had, because in reality, he had no real vision. There's a disconnect there. Yes, Jay-Z can spot the raw talent of a J. Cole, but being a generation removed, he was kind of out of touch in terms of the type of sound an artist like that should go for, the type of marketing tactics and distribution that you should go for, the power of the internet in this era versus radio. Drake understood this. That's why he stretched out the promotion specifically of his So Far Gone mixtape and funneled that hype into his debut album. Plus, he sang and rapped. It was easier for him to generate the hits rather than it was for Cole. It was only when Cole set zero limitations on himself and started creating from a more stress-free, isolated environment where he got the inspiration to sample a song off of College Dropout by Kanye West and turn that into his first hit song, Workout, which Jay-Z initially did not like and wanted Cole to instead release some club-inspired, auto-tune-drenched attempt at a hit that would have been maybe perfect for the radio, but awful for where Cole wanted to go creatively. He ended up eventually giving Cole the creative freedom that he wanted and that he needed to excel the way he did. But it came with tons of ups and downs at the beginning. They were at one party where Drake came by and Jay-Z looked at Drake and said, "Yo, can you just give my boy a hit?" Basically in Cole's face, talking to his biggest competitor at the time, saying, "I know you're much better at the very thing that I need my artist to do right now, aka making hits, so please, I beg of you, give him one." That's gotta crush your confidence as a brand new artist coming into the game. And a couple months later at a different party, J. Cole was eventually fed up and said, "Look, like, when you made Reasonable Doubt, Were you tied to these creative constraints where you needed a radio hit? Were you chasing a certain sound to fit whatever was in the mainstream at the time, or did you just do what felt natural to you? And obviously, that album was initially released when I believe Rockefeller was still an independent label. So there wasn't that type of major label pressure to, perform to a certain standard, right? And it's always when artists are held to that certain standard that they typically end up fumbling under the pressure or just not meeting a certain unrealistic expectations that fans end up setting. But it's even harder when you're casted under the shadow of an artist who's much bigger to you. And that is the pitfall of signing to another artist. Also, whether it's in an attempt to not be in that bigger artist's shadow that you're signed to, or whether it's just, creative or personal disputes over the release of your music, it's hard to usually maintain the same level of camaraderie and collaboration and the same relationship that you have with the bigger artists that you're signed to as your career progresses. There's usually money differences, creative differences, whatever the case is. Look at Rick Ross's Maybach music label. That completely disbanded and he had issues with Meek Mill over finances at one point. Look at Kanye West's Good Music. I don't think he has a relationship with any of the artists who were signed to that label. Look at Kanye and Jay-Z. Alright, maybe the problem is just Kanye, but it was weird throughout the 2010s, right? I mean, not only did all the things that I just described go down between Jay-Z and J. Cole, but after he finally got that hit and was able to release his debut album, we never really saw Jay-Z co-sign or work with Cole in the capacity that he did with a Kanye West, or the way that Ross did with Meek Mill, or Wayne did with Drake and Nicki. They've got, one collaboration together? And I don't think that was in any way Cole trying to avoid being in Jay-Z's shadow, right? If anything, it would have helped J. Cole's career by having more Jay-Z collabs. I mean, look how many times Jay-Z collabed with Kanye West, and Kanye West came up right under Jay-Z. Both Jay-Z and Kanye had varying sounds, right? The same way J. Cole had a different sound to Jay-Z. Maybe it was things going sour over disagreements in the beginning of J. Cole's career. I mean, again, he had to fight Jay-Z for creative freedom and constantly comparing himself to not just Jay-Z's legacy, but also wanting to debut on the level of a College Dropout or Nas's Illmatic. And then he's looking at Kendrick, who's getting all of the cultural praise, and Drake, who's getting all the commercial success, and he's kind of like that middle child, right? It was only once he fully deaded the idea of having a lead single, of subjecting himself to radio-sounding music in any capacity on Forest Hills Drive, where he actually saw the success and made the type of project that he wanted to make all along. And this was the first time that J. Cole really just had full creative ownership of his work, right? And this is when we really saw his legacy being detached from Jay-Z. And this is the moment where Cole really started to strive on levels that we hadn't seen earlier in his career. It's possible that JID needs the exact same thing, that creative control. But speaking of creative control, J. Cole actually founded Dreamville Records in 2007 when he was working on his debut mixtape, and he created the label specifically to maintain creative control over his music and eventually support other artists. First, he signed a longtime friend of his, Omen. Then he signed Boz, who he met in 2010 in Queens. But initially, the record label was just formed as a way to protect Cole's autonomy over his own artistic direction, production, and release decisions without interference from major labels. And the starting of this record label allowed him to control the vision of initially releasing a lot of these online mixtapes before building up the buzz to drop the debut, right? Cole said, "Dreamville was created out of necessity. I wanted to control my own destiny, my own creative output, and give a home to artists who felt the same. I started Dreamville because I didn't want to be at the mercy of a label telling me what to do with my music or how to move. It was about freedom and building something real for me and my team." Unfortunately, though, it was once he signed to another artist that creative freedom was now stripped from him. And I think it was a direct cause of one bigger artist being from the generation prior and being detached to, again, the sound of today, the way you promote your music today, the power of different tools like the internet today, and subjecting Cole to outdated tactics like rushing the track list of his debut album to get it out at a certain time, or making music with the sole purpose of trying to land on radio. That's why his debut album didn't hit the way Forest Hills Drive was when he got back that creative control. And I say all that to say, this is possibly what JID was dealing with in the interim of his last album in 2022 to 3 years later in 2025 when we get his brand new project. Now, J. Cole discovered JID in 2014. Similar to Jay-Z finding J. Cole discovered JID through his online mixtape 31 Cinderella, and being impressed by how strong of a lyricist JID was, Cole ended up meeting him in Atlanta and signing him to Dreamville by 2017. JID would build a small buzz, dropping his debut album in 2019, and around that same time, the label became very dominant within hip-hop with a lot of promising potential, and that was thanks to the moves Cole made to really put these artists first, in the sense that he was platforming them on a higher level than he was platforming himself. At one point. That point was around 2019 when Cole went on a historic feature run while also building up his Dreamville Collective to be the biggest hip-hop label with the most potential in the game at one point. And this was all due to the reason that Cole, stepping back and looking at his career, didn't want to say that he left the game without having the opportunity to have a run that was really focused and centered on collaboration and teaming up with new artists and giving other artists a platform. And for that reason, he ended up booking like a recording compound where a bunch of different artists and producers stayed at for several days, weeks, I don't know how long. And that's when they ended up cooking up the third Dreamville Collective album, Revenge of the Dreamers 3.
I'm reaching a point in my career over this past year, I'm like, bro, I don't want to look back 20 years from now and be like, yo, I never worked with nobody, I never had no fun, boom, boom. So I had this idea, let's go somewhere, lock in, and invite a bunch of outside producers or artists.
This project was a massive look for JID. It ended up being the album that had the highest first week sales that he was a part of in his entire career. And J. Cole really took a backseat on this project, letting the other artists on the label shine and kind of bring their vision to light. And at one point in the process, J. Cole talked about having this writer's block because he struggled between separating himself as the executive versus the artist. He wasn't in artist mode, he was more in executive mode.
I hear a beat I like, and I'm like, damn, I can't write nothing. And I realized it's because I was wearing two hats at the same time. Like, I'm in here on day one as an executive, like, okay, is everybody good? And when I would get a beat, I sit down to write and be like, yo, I'm mad, uninspired.
And I think that's the problem that a lot of rapper executives end up having, right? It's very hard to separate your own music career when you're trying to also develop an artist under you. And that's for many different reasons. Number one, usually the artist under you comes from a different generation. So you're probably not as in touch with what the younger fans want that they resonate with. And that could lead to you kind of misguiding them, right? The same way Jay-Z did to J. Cole at the beginning of his career. Or in the case of a Lil Wayne or even a Rick Ross, right? Your artist can oftentimes end up overshadowing you. And there's this big battle between letting it happen versus, giving into your ego to where this power struggle comes out. And there's a lot of insecurities and emotions wrapped up into this, right? Because as a rapper signing another rapper, you kind of have this weird balance of wanting the rapper to go on to do great things, but also not wanting to get outshined, which makes it hard when you're coming in thinking, okay, how can I push these artists to be the best that they could be, but how can I also push myself to the highest of my creative abilities? It's two different ways of thinking, and that's what kind of confused J. Cole at this particular period of time. So as far as JID goes, J. Cole spoke on him saying the first thing is how gifted he was with putting his words together. The thing that solidified it was when I saw his work ethic and his hunger. A lot of people want it, but they're not willing to put in the work. He's not one of those people. His potential is GOAT status. This is what J. Cole said in 2018. We're now 7 years removed from that quote. Years later, we would see J. Cole struggling between balancing being an executive and being an artist. And we'd see JID take these long hiatuses. So what exactly happened? Did industry politics play a part in it? Well, it's kind of hard to say because when JID speaks on meeting J. Cole, he says it was very organic. It wasn't no industry stuff. It was really like I F with your art type stuff. One night, Cole came to one of my shows in New York. I was cool with a guy associated with Dreamville. I would send him music after we got off tour, but I didn't know he was playing that music for Cole. But he was the whole time. Cole had a concert in Atlanta and he came to my crib. And ever since then, it was just history. So the signing seemed natural, right? Cole heard his music and saw potential, GOAT status potential, and wanted to give him a shot. And again, JID never had direct bad things to say about J. Cole. He also mentioned when I first met J. Cole, he never flexed, he only gave me respect. I respect and love him as a person. Outside of music, he's a good guy, and I try to surround myself with people like that. In another interview, he said, what made me feel good about my label situation was just the sincerity of the people we linked up with. But this was in 2018. It still leaves us with the unanswered question of what the hell happened between 2019, JID's first album, and 2025, when we've only gotten 2 other projects in a 6-year window. They're phenomenal projects. We're going to touch slightly on this new album, and maybe I'll do a full review if you guys want that. Drop a comment. But 2 albums in 6 years, that's not necessarily enough to be in the conversation of GOAT status, like J. Cole wanted, right? Well, we got some interesting comments and interviews in those past 6 years. One of them being when JID was asked who's in his top 5 of all time, and you can tell he really pauses to make sure his answer is perfect, right? Like he selects the most perfect artist, and he ends up going far beyond just a list of 5. But one individual who does not make that list is J. Cole, and this is years after he's already signed to Cole.
So Jay-Z, Wayne, Outkast is 1.
So far, you're 3 for 3.
Earl Sweatshirt.
Earl Sweatshirt.
It's kind of crazy, right?
You gotta feel
I'm
that.
thinking like a lot of names.
What are some names going through your head?
Like Thug, like
Thug, okay.
K-Dot, of course.
K-Dot, yeah.
You
Shout
know,
out to Earl
it's
Sweatshirt.
different vibes.
And this isn't necessarily to, again, imply that they have any beef of any kind. I just think it's very interesting in the sense that when an artist signs to another artist, if both of them are not on the same wavelength, they're not making similar music, they're not headed kind of in a similar direction, have a similar vision for where they want their careers to go, it usually doesn't end up working out. And I'm not saying they have to sound the same, right? JID and J. Cole don't have to sound the same, but look at like a Drake and a Wayne, right? Both those guys came in the game, similar blueprint of doing an abundance of features, killing hooks, becoming hit-making machines, always bigging each other up, talking about Wayne's the best rapper alive, then Wayne would say, nah, Drake is the best rapper alive. Or even look as recently as rapper-owned labels like Travis Scott's Cactus Jack. He signed a bunch of different artists, but the only one who really worked out was Don Toliver, who took tons of inspiration from Travis, who follows his blueprint creatively. Travis really ushered Don into the game, whereas artists like Sheck West or Sofego, these were kind of artists Travis just found. They don't necessarily have as much in common artistically, and the push from Cactus Jack never really helped these artists get to that next level. Same thing with Young Thug. Young Thug signed and came up with artists like Gunna. Gunna obviously took immense influence from him and respects him and would probably say Young Thug is in his top 5, right? And I think that's why his career was able to succeed. And I think that's the case for all these guys who sign under other rappers, right? It's that not only are they allowed to kind of execute on their own creative vision and have that creative freedom, but the artist they're signed to is kind of on the same wavelength, kind of has the same approach to whether it's making music or building a legacy in general. And I don't think JID and J. Cole ever had that. Same thing with J. Cole and Jay-Z. I don't think they're too far removed in terms of generations, in terms of style, approach, everything. And JID even emphasized this in another interview, stating that he doesn't really listen to Cole's music that much.
I'm a spitter, and I didn't find anybody else that could like hold that type of thunder in their hands. And I just feel like Cole a legend, you know what I'm saying? And it actually helped me get more acclimated with him, because before I was like, I don't know if it's bad to say, but I never really listened to Cole like that before I signed to him. But after meeting him and all of that, he's just been a solid dude.
And I think that's the biggest red flag, right? Like if you're signing under an artist specifically because of, you know, their star power and the type of environment they foster with their label, but you don't align with their kind of sound and their music, I don't think you're going to understand their vision. They're not going to understand yours. There's going to be a misalignment. But regardless, when JID first signed to Dreamville, he was the obvious star of the label, right? Of artists who started dropping major label projects after like 2019, he's definitely in the top 5. And that's why everyone has always pinned him to be the leader of this generation, right? He's 3 albums in. His contributions to the Dreamville album were incredible. All of his solo projects were incredible. But throughout that, when was the last time you saw him collaborate with J. Cole? Yes, he says he has an entire album's worth of song with Cole, but when was that recorded? Why hasn't it been released? Why does J. Cole never show up for JID or drop a verse on his projects, feature him on his own projects? It seemed like from the jump, the way they kind of described things, yes, J. Cole was very, I guess you could say, lenient with the way that he let artists on his label execute their vision, but it never seemed like JID and Cole's creative identities and overall missions aligned. And I think that's why we haven't necessarily seen J. Cole be as active of a mentor in JID's career or just play a presence in the collaborative process as we have with many other rapper signed to rapper pairings, if that makes sense. Signing JID almost seems like, I don't want to say a business transaction, because I think Cole is definitely music first, and that's why he struggled with that writer's block when he was in too much of an executive mindset versus an artist mindset. But I do think it was J. Cole trying to fulfill this mission that he had forever of forming a collective, of really talented MCs and just creating some dope music on some like Wu-Tang stuff, right? And I feel like with that type of creative freedom, it would foster an environment that was not very similar to the strict corporate vibes that Jay-Z inflicted early in Cole's career on Roc Nation. So maybe this was like an older Cole trying to fulfill what he wanted out of the game initially when he first came up, and projecting that onto new artists. And as a result, he signs a very talented rapper in JID, but creatively, they're not on the same wavelength. Again, I know I keep repeating this, but I think that's why you don't see them together much. I think that's why JID has been on this weird trajectory throughout his entire career where he's dropping phenomenal projects, but taking way too much time off, why he's not kind of taking more advantage of his strong suits or releasing a lot of unreleased bangers that he probably has with Metro Boomin or J. Cole. It seems like he's sitting on a lot of untapped potential and a misguided vision thanks to signing to a rapper who he didn't listen to much, who's not very similar to him, who has his own struggles internally with how to balance or how to execute on being an executive versus being an artist. And also in JID's case, like, he's a very lyric-driven artist, right? Which already off the bat makes it hard to promote someone like that versus a more commercial act like a Gunna or Don Toliver, or back in the day, a Drake, a Big Sean, a Wiz Khalifa. JID is in the exact same position J. Cole was in when he first came in the game, signed under Roc Nation. The only difference is I don't think JID has fully formed into his own the way Cole did once he had his Forest Hills Drive. I don't think JID has his Forest Hills Drive yet. And everyone thought it would be this new project, which is amazing, which could go on to have the longevity of a Forest Hills Drive. It might be too early to tell, but what was also weird is that it was 3 years in the making. This album has been done for a while. It's been constantly getting delayed. And another artist on the label was facing the same issues. Ari Lennox, another artist that was very hard for Dreamville to execute her vision and promote her on the level of, let's say, a SZA or a Summer Walker or her. H-E-R, not her like as in Ari Lennox. She signed with Dreamville all the way back in December of 2015. She released her debut album, Shea Butter Baby, 4 years later in 2019. Similar to JID, she faced years of delays. But she did praise the label's support, saying that Cole and Ebe gave me the space to be me. This new album is my soul. That was in 2019. By 2022, her second album drops, and she hints at frustrations with the promotion of it, saying I put my heart into this, but sometimes I feel like the label doesn't know how to push me right. By October of 2024, Lennox had publicly demanded release from Dreamville via Instagram, citing neglect on her career, saying, Interscope and Dreamville have been playing with me all month, and I'm so exhausted. I'm so tired of people treating me like they're so sorry for me. I'm okay and have never been happier. What I don't like is being signed and lied to and manipulated. Not one person at those labels ever knew how to market or protect me. Y'all don't know the half of it. Constant letdown and neglect. This industry stuff will never be for me. A couple months later, she confirmed that after posting this on Instagram, she spoke to J. Cole in private and said, I was hurt, but I know J. Cole respects me as an artist. And by 2025, in April, Ari Lennox ended up parting ways with Dreamville amicably, but for some reason still staying with Interscope. She performed at that Dreamville festival, which will end up being the final Dreamville festival. We'll touch on that shortly. And she said, thank you for making my dreams a reality. And aside from Ari, who in the end from the Dreamville camp has actually come up and fulfilled anything close to what was maybe expected after the release of Revenge of the Dreamers 3 back in 2019, right? Like, JID has gone on to do amazing things. Cause has released a couple projects, so has Boz, I believe, and Omen, but have any of them stick? Have any of them had real impact outside of just being, signed to J. Cole? I think the only ones who have really done more than just be quote-unquote signed to J. Cole are Ari Lennox and JID. And those are the two that separated themselves the most from the Dreamville collective and went on to cultivate their own fan base and kind of do their own thing. And over the years, and as the promise of what we saw in 2019 from the Dreamville collective kind of seemed to dwindle, it seemed like J. Cole started focusing more on himself and his career as an artist versus being an executive. The only Dreamville artist we saw him collaborate with very heavily has been Boss. And then the Kendrick Lamar beef happens, right? And this leads to some weird stuff between the entire Dreamville camp in general. So, firstly, J. Cole released a 7-minute drill. He's dissing Kendrick Lamar. Then he has the Dreamville Festival, which all the Dreamville artists are there to perform at. JID himself is performing there. Cole is performing there. None of them know that J. Cole had been planning on releasing this song or apologizing for it afterwards. And that was intentional, and I think that is smart because why tie your artists in to this whole mess that has nothing to do with them? But Wayno, who was doing interviews at the festival. And shout out to Wayno. He's an amazing creator right now, and he's been an amazing creator way back in the Everyday Struggle days. But he was doing interviews at the Dreamville Fest, and he said that a lot of these Dreamville guys, this was at the time again that J. Cole had just dropped 7 Minute Drill, and none of them knew he was about to apologize. They were talking crazy like, yo, what has Kendrick really done? J. Cole craps on him. Way better artist, has accomplished way more. Kendrick has nothing on him. Basically talking crazy, right? Riding for Cole. But he's categorizing the entire Dreamville as saying this, as having this narrative.
Y'all Dreamville, man, y'all gas Cole up. Because listen, I was having sideline conversations with a lot of the homies. And a lot of my Dreamville homies was basically saying that that he's overrated. What has he done? And it's one thing to say, okay, Kendrick then says something, we gonna rap at him. But it's another thing for like the homies around, that's around Cole to be saying shit like, yeah, man, like he ain't never, or he ain't this, or don't nobody listen to that. And I'm like, yo, y'all dead serious?
Right away, many people assume that it was JID who these comments were made about. Again, JID is kind of like, aside from J. Cole, the face of the label. He's the biggest artist, most talented one by far on the label. So when a rap beef kicks off, the most lyrical rapper on the label, people are going to turn to him and be like, yeah, he's the one that's ready for war, right? Well, wrong, because JID actually went on Twitter replying to some fans saying, I don't really kick it with the Dreamville guys like that. This is absolute cap. And this is very weird to me because it's one thing to not want to insert yourself in a war, but it's another when like these rumors are being circulated online and the way you choose to respond is by being like, I'm not even really attached to this whole collective. I don't hang out with them anymore like that. It just kind of creates a weird perception of what's really going on with J. Cole's label right now. It seems weird to me that JID was so quick to want to make sure the world knew that he was not trying to go against Kendrick in any capacity, right? Even if it meant exposing the fact that he's not really that locked in with his record label at this point and kind of making Cole look bad indirectly in the process. And this is kind of what I've been saying all along, right? In that it never seemed like JID was fully aligned with the mission that J. Cole had for his career and for Dreamville. And because of that, I think JID was in a home that he felt like he didn't belong in, right? And this year alone, yes, we hear him praise Cole, but we hear him praise Kendrick a lot more. Like in July of this year, he was saying that he needs a verse from Kendrick Lamar. He's emphasized this in multiple different interviews and Instagram lives.
Hell yeah, I need a collab. Nigga f with that. Nigga need a dot collab, with bro.
And again, not to mention the fact that he had Kendrick in his top 5 without J. Cole. And of course, after Cole's apology in the beef, you get this, Port Antonio song where he's more so trying to make amends with Drake than he is with Kendrick. Then you get the weird comments from another Dreamville artist, the one who's definitely most closely associated with J. Cole in 2025, does the most collabs, always talking about J. Cole and speaking very highly of him, always moving around with J. Cole. That's Boss. And Boss had replied to some comments Ebro had made about Drake just being, toxic to the culture and his fan base, not really being fans of hip hop, but being more fans of Drake. And Boss had said, "My 2 cents, Ebro, Drake is among the most, if not the most, inclusive artists of our culture, pushing countless rappers to the forefront, dancehall artists, Afro beats, R&B, reggaeton, older artists, newer artists, etc. I don't get this culture narrative that's persisted since the battle. If it's a Canadian thing, I'd argue that Toronto is an hour flight away from New York City. I'd argue their culture and ethnic makeup is more akin to New York than pretty much any city in the States. And surely it's not his pen. He's arguably the greatest writer of a generation. So what is it?" And then he replies to himself saying, "I said he's arguably the greatest writer. Kendrick is a part of that, as is Cole." I don't know. It seems like he's clearly picking a side here, right? And the same side Cole seems to be aligned with, right? After Port Antonio saying, "Drake, you'll always be my guy," kind of making it seem like he lost a friend in Drake and trying to win him back on that song. Whereas JID, on the other end, isn't really, saying anything crazy about the beef, but emphasizing how much he wants to collab with Kendrick. So it's kind of a weird inconsistency in terms of thought process going on at Dreamville. And again, like I've been saying this entire video, right? I'm a broken record at this point. I don't think their mission, their values, their personality, anything was never aligned. J. Cole and JID, I don't think have ever been aligned creatively. And I think it makes it very hard for a rapper signed to another rapper to succeed and reach the milestones that the rapper he signed to has already achieved when both rappers are not on the same kind of wavelength creatively. And this could be singers as well. It doesn't just have to be a rapper signed to a rapper. But in this case, I think that J. Cole ended up fumbling JID the way that Jay-Z fumbled J. Cole. And I use fumble very loosely, I guess you could say, Because obviously J. Cole and JID have both gone on to be successes, right? And we don't know behind the scenes the type of advice or game that Jay gave to J. Cole that changed his career, and the same with J. Cole to JID. But on the outside looking in, there seems to be a lot of kind of missteps in their career that could definitely be attributed to industry politics. I don't think JID waited this long to release an album due to him wanting to, perfect it or anything like that. I think it's been ready for a while, and it's been industry stuff that has kept the album held back. A label needs to make a return on their investment. That's why Ari Lennox kept getting delayed with her project. I think it's the same situation with JID. But when we finally do get this project from JID, again, he opens up the album with the lyrics talking about being frustrated that fans are, constantly putting these high expectations on his commercial performance, as if they're record label executives obsessing over numbers, right? But it's only because I think he has so much potential that fans were hoping he would embody what J. Cole did in the early 2010s. Leading the next generation. And whether you love the idea or hate it, numbers don't lie, and they do kind of dictate your impact in terms of the longevity that your music has. I mean, it's literally like record sales are determined by how many times people stream a song. How many times people stream a song is how influential and how impactful that song is, right? Because it means people are listening to it a lot. We are in an age where numbers kind of dictate influence more than ever in a certain way. It's not the only thing that matters. But again, JID is expressing his frustration with those overarching expectations, and at the same time, he raps later in the album on the song VCR saying, I open up my soul and it opens doors. I'm not killing stuff because of Cole, it's because I'm cold. Basically, again, separating himself from the whole Dreamville camp, saying, I am not where I am today because I'm tied to some major rapper. It's just because I'm a great rapper myself. Now, as far as JID as a rapper, I love this album so far, but there are some gripes with it that I do think play a role into why he isn't in a bigger position than he should be today. Like, I find he does have an amazing skill, oddly enough, that works extremely well in his favor and to his benefit, or works in his detriment. And that's his constant flow switches and his ability to range his vocal style on a very wide spectrum. And on paper, this sounds great, right? Like, the more versatile you could get with the way you rap, the more engaged your audience will be. But at the same time, the more flows you incorporate, the more likely it is that some of them won't hit for everybody. And for me, that's the case with his like rapidy rap type flow. Most of the flows are amazing, but it's a numbers game. You pitch 100 different flows, odds are you're going to have more flows that are bad versus a rapper like, let's say, I don't know, Gunna, who has like the same 3 flows, right? Like, there's only so much room for error when you're not really experimenting that much. Take a song like What We On off his new project, for example. A lot of experimentation there for a rapper of JID's caliber. I think it's a very smooth track, and I understand he was going for a more laid-back melodic style there, but then he comes in with the, hobbity type of flow and bars like, she wants me to be her mister. It makes it hard to kind of enjoy the song for what it is. It's supposed to be like this vibey, smooth, lo-fi type of love song, but at the same time, you're almost getting in your like Slim Shady bag on the verse. So it's like, which one is it? Which direction do you want to go? He's all over the place a little bit. And although my criticisms are very few and far between on this project and on JID in general, because again, on paper, everything sounds great, right? JID is an amazing rapper. He's highly skilled at not just putting words together, but painting the entire picture. His voice is extraterrestrial, like a Young Thug or Lil Wayne, and sometimes he can even take it in a farther range. His flows can be as fast and ferocious as an Eminem, but he knows when to also slow it down or switch it up before it sounds like complete ear abuse, like Eminem kind of does sound like in 2025. He can get honest and deep and personal about himself, like his boss J. Cole, or very introspective and in his storytelling bag about society as a whole, like one of his favorite rappers, Kendrick Lamar. He can sequence projects well like a Kanye West, but yet something just falls short every single time. Slightly. Again, few and far criticisms in between amazing projects, but we're only getting one in every 3 years. So the bar is raised very high because of the time you end up taking off. And is it because of all the things I named that he isn't at that superstar level that he could be today, that many fans think he should be today? Maybe it's because all the different amazing traits I just named that JID has, he doesn't do them as well or execute on them the way the other people I compared those traits to do, right? Like an Eminem, Kendrick, Cole, Young Thug even. I saw someone tweet out that JID is the best lyrical rapper who doesn't have a single quotable in their entire career. And I guess I could see where that perspective is coming from. But then again, I shouldn't be comparing him to anyone because he's an extremely unique artist. He doesn't sound like he's biting anybody, and the art is prioritized over all the corporate gimmicks, right? He keeps his artistic integrity. So what's the problem exactly? Ultimately, what I think it is that JID has always felt like he's trying to figure things out. Like he doesn't fully fit in this landscape of hip-hop. Like, he's not young, right? Don't get it confused. We still treat him like he's a young emerging artist with all this potential, but you have guys in his class like Denzel Curry or Freddie Gibbs who you don't put on that same type of pedestal as a JID, but at the same time, they're a lot more active and drop a higher number of amazing projects than JID does. JID is also from Atlanta, which is arguably the most commercially dominant region in hip-hop today, yet he only has one major hit under his belt. And of course, that's because his sound and subject matter doesn't align with anything from the trap scene that JID grew up in, but doesn't embody artistically. And of course, at the same time, the biggest problem of all this is that it's never felt like JID had a comfortable home within hip-hop. He was debating early on signing to Quality Control, which has housed a lot of his Atlanta peers like Lil Baby and the Migos. The CEOs of Quality Control have played integral roles in artist development for all the successful artists that they fostered. And it wasn't just that he needed to sign to a rapper-owned label, but since he did take that path, you would think if Cole can't help him from a business perspective, he at least would be able to help him from a collaborative standpoint, right? But there's a disconnect here. Like I mentioned before, JID never listened to J. Cole's music before signing to him. Cole was likely in a bidding war with a bunch of other labels and wanted JID because he was a great talent, not because the two had some aligned artistic vision. With Kendrick Lamar, yes, I know he has a familial bond with Baby Keem, which might make the collaborative process easier, but he has been ghostwriting for Baby Keem for a long time and has been helping Keem from the beginning stages of his career develop into a stronger artist. So it's not even the excuse that JID doesn't drop a lot of music because neither does Baby Keem. Both of them haven't put out an album in years. In fact, I think Baby Keem has taken longer in between projects than JID does. But yet, it still feels like Baby Keem has figured out many aspects of being a potential superstar that JID hasn't yet. Creating the hits, creating, bigger feeling albums. But maybe that's not something JID wants. Maybe he just wants to put out great music and whoever it resonates with, so be it. And I think Offset put it great. Someone who collaborated with JID recently, but is not the most conventional artist that you'd see JID link up with. He was saying JID is the best rapper out of Atlanta right now. And that's true. JID is an amazing rapper. But he also pointed out something very interesting in that JID, while he's not necessarily talked about in the media so much, while he doesn't get the press coverage as being, the most commercially dominant or influential rapper, he has slowly and steadily cultivated an audience of really, really dedicated fans who show up for him at all times. That's why even with low record sales, even with a delay of 3 years in between projects, even with him feeling like he hasn't truly fit in, he's still selling out 5,000 people plus venues on his tours. And I think it speaks volumes to the importance of creative freedom, right? And feeling confident in the people around you. If you feel like you're a part of an environment that champions your creative direction, that is in line with your vision, your morals, your perception of what the future looks like for you, you'll have the opportunity to succeed more than any other artist could. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next one.